assassin. So why is it a silent assassin? Once you have it, you may not be aware of it. It creeps up on you and appears apparently out of the blue, determined to take you out, and it may give you a mortal wound. Now, there are many people who have been affected by hypertension or high blood pressure. I just want to go through a few that you may know. So back in the day, many of us used to sit down to Top of the Pops, and we used to listen to Barry White, singer, songwriter, musician, was this beautiful, deep baritone voice. He was diagnosed with high blood pressure in 1995, and he had to even cancel a tour in 1999 due to his health problems. In 2002, he was hospitalized for kidney failure just 7 years after his diagnosis of high blood pressure. He died on the 4th of July, 2003, a few months after suffering a stroke. He was only 58 years old. What about this beautiful lady? We all know her, Whitney Houston, singer, actress. And many of us know how she died. She was found on February 11th, 2012, unconscious in the bathtub of her hotel suite and was pronounced dead a bit later. Even though it was revealed that cocaine and a few of the drugs were found in her body, now the official cause of her death was drowning, along with atherosclerotic heart disease, which was linked to undiagnosed high blood pressure. She had hypertension. She was only 48 years old. Okay. All right, so some of our younger viewers may know this guy, Michael Clarke Duncan, an actor best known for his role in the movie The Green Mile. He suffered from different health issues, including high blood pressure and kidney problems. He suffered a heart attack on July the 12th, and 2 months later, he died on September the 3rd. He was only 54 years old. What about this lovely lady, Margaret Thatcher, known as the Iron Lady, the first female Prime Minister of Britain? She died peacefully from a stroke on the 8th of April, 2013. She lived till she was 87 years old, so she had a good innings. She exceeded her 70 years. However, this was not Margaret's first stroke. It was reported that she had suffered several strokes between 2001 and 2002. Her health woes also included dementia, with which she was diagnosed in 2008, all related to high blood pressure. Okay, American sprinting legend Michael Johnson, the man with the golden shoes, suffered a stroke in September 2018. Yep, he was 51 years old, this fit man. After a visit to A&E, he was admitted to the hospital where he was diagnosed with an ischemic stroke, which is caused when a clot blocks blood flow to the brain. He had a TIA, a transient ischemic attack. The incident left him unable to walk. However, after applying the discipline of physical Olympian training, there is now no evidence of his stroke. There is no now apparent evidence of his stroke. But remember, once we've had a stroke, you have brain damage. He concludes that it could happen to anyone. So we've looked at some famous people who have experienced diseases caused by high blood pressure, which highlights some important points that I'm going to bring out in this presentation. We all know, every one of us on this platform, I would say, knows somebody who's been impacted by hypertension, whether it's a heart attack, whether it's stroke, whether it's kidney failure. We know somebody. Even me personally, within my family, My mother and my father, both of them have had strokes. My dad had 2 strokes. My mother's had at least 1 stroke, if not more. So let's look at who is affected by high blood pressure, hypertension. Now, the global burden of disease in 2015 highlights that high blood pressure is the second biggest known global risk factor for disease after poor diet. So essentially what they're saying is, if you eat a poor diet, it's going to cause you to have disease. But also they're recognizing that the second one, if you have high blood pressure, you're definitely going to get disease. In the UK, high blood pressure is the 3rd biggest risk factor for disease. So the first risk factor is smoking. So we all know that smoking causes so many different diseases, lung cancer, cardiovascular disease, and other things like that. Then poor diet, then high blood pressure. Now, in the world, approximately 25% of people have high blood pressure. High blood pressure is one of the most important treatable causes of premature morbidity, sickness, and mortality, death in the world. In 2015, in the UK, it was reported that high blood pressure affected more than 1 in 4 adults in England. So in England, there are more people having high blood pressure than in the world. Around 1/3 of men have blood pressure, and over 1/4 of women have it. Around 13.5 million people in the UK in 2015 had high blood pressure. And high blood pressure has contributed to around 75,000 deaths. And we're not even looking at people who are disabled after having issues with high blood pressure. So more than 5.5 million people are undiagnosed, and we're looking at the UK. So for every 10 people who are diagnosed with hypertension, a further 7 people remain undiagnosed and untreated. And that is a challenge for this week, to find those 7 people on this platform that have undiagnosed high blood pressure, hypertension. So let's look at who's affected by high blood pressure. Let's continue looking at that. So having high blood pressure can triple your risk of stroke and heart disease. Almost 2/3 of stroke survivors leave hospital with a disability. So if you have a stroke and you survived, 2/3 of those people who survive are leaving with a disability, maybe not be aphasia, not being able to speak properly. There's a weakness on one side, cognitive problems, etc. Stroke causes more disabilities than any other condition. Black people, people from the African diaspora, are almost twice as likely to have a stroke than white people. On average, people of Black African, Black Caribbean, and South Asian descent in the UK have strokes earlier on in their lives, as much as 10 years before their white brothers and sisters. Research suggests that this is because Black people are more likely to have high blood pressure and diabetes than white people, which is understandable. So both these things are stroke risk factors. So in the last 20 years, the incidence of stroke in London has decreased by 40% for white people, but has not decreased for Black people. Black people are more likely to have sickle-cell disorder, which increases the risk of a stroke. And children are not immune to hypertension either. Every year, 400 children are affected by strokes as well. So let's look at some of the costs of having hypertension. So new figures from Public Health England reveal that diseases caused by high blood pressure are estimated to cost the NHS over £2 billion every year. So what diseases are we talking about? We mentioned coronary heart disease, we've mentioned strokes, which is a common one, dementia, we've mentioned kidney disease, just to name a few. High blood pressure, which can often be prevented or controlled through lifestyle changes, accounts for 12% of all visits to the GPs in England. Now, by reducing blood pressure of the nation as a whole, we can save 850 million of the NHS and social care spend over 10 years. So if just 15% more people who are unaware they have high blood pressure are diagnosed, then we could save 120 million of NHS and social care spend. Just identifying 15%. And if we identify another 15%, then again, we'll save another 120 million pounds of NHS and social care spend. So the question is, what is hypertension? So the explanation is in the word. To break the word down, it just means high blood pressure. Blood pressure is the force at which your heart pumps blood around your body. So when we take our blood pressure reading, it consists of two numbers shown as one number on top of the other. So the first number, the top number, is your systolic blood pressure. So it's the highest level your blood pressure reaches when your heart beats. So when your left ventricle contracts, it's the force at which your heart pumps blood around your body. The second, or the bottom number, is your diastolic blood pressure. So it's the lowest pressure in the arteries when your heart is refilling with blood for another beat. It's the lowest level your blood pressure reaches as your heart relaxes between beats. So it's the resistance to the blood flow in the blood vessels. So I like to remember it as, you know, when doctors or professional talks about the diastolic or systolic, sometimes you can get confused. And as a nurse, I always used to remember systolic begins with S, the sky, so it's the high one. Diastolic begins with D, down, that's the lower one. So what is, according to the UK, the ideal blood pressure? The UK defines ideal blood pressure reading between 90 to 60 millimeters of mercury, 90 over 60 millimeters of mercury, so it's a range, 120 to 80 millimeters of mercury. So hypertension is a sign that indicates a potential ill health condition. So according to the UK, if you persistently measure a blood pressure at 140 over 90 millimeters of mercury, then you have high blood pressure. So it's 100, that's according to the UK, the NHS. So what are the complications of high blood pressure? Okay, so if your blood pressure is high, it puts extra strain on your blood vessels, your heart, and other organs, such as your brain, your kidneys, your eyes. So persistent high blood pressure can increase your risk of a number of serious and potentially life-threatening health conditions. So let's look at some of them. So the brain. So what can happen if you have persistently high blood pressure, according to the UK level, over 140 over 90 and above? So what happens to the brain? We've mentioned it before. You can have strokes, you can have dementia, You can have Alzheimer, you can have cognitive declines. So Margaret Thatcher, she got dementia, Alzheimer, she got cognitive decline. This woman with a fantastic brain that governed, managed, led Britain for so many years, her brain ability was destroyed. So you also can get hypertensive encephalopathy, which is confusion, lethargy, seizure, and coma. So what happens to your heart? Understandably, you can get heart attack, you can have a cardiac arrest, heart enlargement, congestive cardiac failure, increased risk of heart rhythm problems, arrhythmias. So what happens to the blood vessels? So atherosclerosis, it's when that fatty plaque coats your arteries and makes your arteries narrow, and it makes the heart have beat harder to get the blood through those narrow arteries. Over time, those arteries can start ballooning, getting weaker, and it can form aneurysms, which can burst. Understandably, a lot of those happen in your brain. That's why people have bleeding on the brain. Kidneys. So because of that ongoing chronic high blood pressure, overall it damages the kidney. People get kidney failure and dialysis. What about the eyes? It can lead to retinal damage and blindness. And especially for the men, they have a slow, weak urine and trouble voiding. But one of the biggest things that I focus on is a cognitive decline. That's one of the most devastating effects of hypertension, which impacts the brain, because once your brain is affected, you become a different person. And many people who are looking after elderly relatives know that they're experiencing dementia, Alzheimer, often contributed by high blood pressure. So while having a stroke may be the most immediate, devastating and feared complication, hypertension appears to accelerate brain aging. High blood pressure among the middle-aged adults have been linked to future cognitive decline and dementia. So if you have high systolic numbers, that is what seems to inflict the most damage. So high blood pressure leads to deficits in numerous brain functions. For example, your memory declines, your reaction time, your ability to be attentive to something or focus on something declines. Your reasoning ability, that front lobe, starts being destroyed. You lack flexibility. You're not able to problem solve. You have difficulty planning. You have difficulty executing different tasks. Your cognitive processing speeds slows down. And if that's not bad enough, if you already have some degree of cognitive decline, hypertension accelerates that decline over time. So even if your hypertension is controlled by medicine and not lifestyle, hypertension will cause a slow deterioration of brain matter, which weakens your ability and intelligence. So even those people out there who are on high blood pressure tablets, over time, it will not prevent the wearing down of your cognitive abilities. And for the first time ever last year, the cause of death, the highest cause of death in women was dementia, which had overtaken heart disease. So let's have a biblical break. Let's see, does the Bible have anything to say about hypertension? Now, there's this wonderful story in 1 Samuel chapter 25, where it narrates the story of Nabal. Nabal was a foolish but rich cattle breeder. He was very, very wealthy. He refused to provide David and his men some of his sheep. as was the custom. Angered, David then vows to slay Nabal. But Nabal's wife, whose name was Abigail, intercedes on behalf of Nabal and the whole Nabal's community and secures the life of her husband and family. Nabal is totally unaware of this, and the night before, he's had this massive riotous party, a lot of heavy alcoholic drinking. And in the morning, when his wife tells him what happens, it says in the Bible, when he heard that his heart died within him, he became as stone. The shocking news, the stress, raised his blood pressure. And coupled with the fact that he had been drinking all night and had dehydration, it caused a massive stroke. Modern researchers believe it was a cardioembolic brainstem stroke. And it says in the Bible, 10 days later, Nabal passes away. So there's another story which we can learn a lot about. Again, we're looking at what the Bible has to say about hypertension. And this is found in Numbers, but also in Psalm 78. And it's about the Israelites when they have left Egypt. So there was the Israelites, and we had the mixed multitude, people who came out with the Israelites, and they were going through the desert. Now, God had fed them angels' food, manna from heaven, but they became fed up with manna, and they wanted flesh food. In fact, they hankered and cried for flesh food. And if you read the Bible story, they were standing at their tent doors, crying to one another, I want meat. We want meat. I'm fed up with this manna. So God knew the meat wasn't good for them. But because they moaned and complained and cried like toddlers, God said, okay, you want it? I'm going to give it to you. So God allowed all these quail, these little birds, to rain down around the camp of the Israelites. And for a whole month, they were gorging on flesh, on animal meat. They were eating this quail. And in fact, it says in the Bible, they were drying it, so they were preserving it. And it says there, so they did eat and were well filled, for God gave them their own desire, but they were not estranged from their lusts. But while their meat was yet in their mouths, the wrath of God came upon them and slew the fattest of them and smote down the chosen men of Israel. Why did they die? And when we look at that situation, they were eating large amounts of protein, animal protein. So they had excess urea in their body. They were in the desert. They weren't drinking enough water. So they were dehydrated as well. The fattest ones obviously had large amount of visceral fat in their bodies. So they had a lot of atherosclerosis in the body. And coupled with high blood pressure caused heart attacks, cardiac arrests, and stroke. Yes, the Bible talks about hypertension and the causes. From these stories, famous people and biblical people as well have alluded to some of the causes of high blood pressure. But let's pin it down. So, you may be surprised to hear that there are two types of hypertension. So most often the doctors say, yeah, you've got hypertension, but there are two types. There's primary and secondary. Secondary hypertension is caused by other diseases. For example, you may have diseased adrenal glands, and those are the glands that sit on top of your kidneys. The small hormone produces glands, they can produce excess hormones that cause high blood pressure. Another disease is overproduction of hormones by the thyroid in the neck can cause high blood pressure. Even sleep apnea, those people who sleep and they wake up in the night because they're not getting enough oxygen, can cause secondary hypertension. Certain drugs also can cause hypertension, like the contraceptive pill, or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen, aspirin, naproxen, and Voltarol. And I can share with you that my husband Arthur, for many years, he was on ibuprofen, and his blood pressure was high, his kidneys were failing, but the doctors didn't know why. We now know it was because he's been on these non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs for many, many years. However, 90% of people with hypertension have primary hypertension. Yeah. So my husband said to let you all know that he came off the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. He no longer takes any drugs, and his blood pressure is low. And we'll talk about that later on, about low blood pressure. So 90% of people with hypertension have primary hypertension. However, both primary and secondary hypertension is caused by lifestyle choices. So as we go through the causes, we will also be looking at the solutions as they are closely connected. So I'm going to focus on the lifestyle changes that can reduce hypertension. So in the Western world, as we age, our pressure gets higher and higher. So by the time we reach 60, more than half of us are affected. Well, we can assume that because it affects most of us when we get older, then it's probably a disease that is linked to aging. However, that is not true. We have known since the 1920s that high blood pressure does not need to occur. Researchers measured the blood pressure of 1,000 people in rural Kenya who ate a diet centered around whole food, whole grains, beans, vegetables, fruits, and dark leafy vegetables. Now, as we, in the Western world, as we age, our blood pressure goes up. Their blood pressure actually went down. As they aged, their blood pressure went down, and the lower, the better. In fact, their blood pressure started off at 110/70, and in many cases were much lower. So that similar research was repeated, and they looked at rural China. You find the same phenomenon. People at a whole food plant-based diet had significantly low blood pressure, some at 110/65. Their blood pressure was the same as a 16-year-old. Also, if you follow a certain lifestyle, you can have similar blood pressure. So the Adventist health studies, these studies are longitudinal studies or epidemiological studies. So my background, I'm public health, and we look at large numbers of people to find answers about what is good health practice. So these studies started off in 1958, and they still continue today. And from these studies, they've found out a lot of information about how to keep yourself healthy. So to date, there have been 6 Adventist health studies done in California, which has produced an amazing amount of evidence of how to keep yourself healthy and live a long, productive life. So why did they look at Adventists? No, Adventists are a diverse group of people of different ethnicities. Some are highly educated, some have a basic education, some are well off, some are economically challenged. So, but they have a number of factors about them in that they do not eat some confounders or variables like smoking or alcohol. Yeah, so they don't drink alcohol and they don't smoke. So what these researchers did, they categorized these Adventists into 5 groups based on what they ate. They had non-vegetarians who ate meat, fish. They had semi-vegetarians. They had those who only ate fish, pescatarians. Then those who ate dairy, milk and eggs, and those who were totally plant-based. Some will call it vegan, I call it plant-based. And what they found is that as you move from the meat eaters downwards to the ones that were totally plant-based, their blood pressure became lower. It went down. So the meat eaters had the highest amount of blood pressure, and those people who were totally whole food plant-based, they had the lowest blood pressure. So what was happening, the phenomenon in Kenya, the phenomenon in China, can be replicated with ordinary Western people. Another study found that people who were on a 7-day residential program, who was placed on a plant-based diet, who ate a low-fat, high carbohydrate, moderate sodium, purely plant-based diet, and they could eat as much as they like during their meal times, they were able to reduce their blood pressure as well. And we looked at diabetes last week. They were able to reduce their diabetic markers and coronary heart disease markers. And that was just in 7 days. So this is a type of program that we run at Manor House. Further studies involving 73 men and women with high blood pressure, they attended a 3-week residential program at Weimar Institute in California. And again, these people, after 3 weeks, they had significant reductions in their blood pressure. So if you start on the program for 7 days, you know what you need to do, you go home and you continue that program. 3 weeks later, your blood pressure will be reduced significantly. All these studies point to what we put in our mouth affects our blood pressure. So what they found is that a high saturated fat diet, and saturated fat is found in animal products, including fish, a high salt diet, a high animal flesh-based diet contributes to high blood pressure. Conversely, a low saturated fat, low salt diet, and a high plant-based diet lowers hypertension and also prevents hypertension. These studies also indicate that the ideal blood pressure throughout our lives, not as we go older that it goes up, should be 110/70 or less. Now let's look at salt. God designed us to eat a plant-based diet consisting of 250 to 500 milligrams. That's about 0.5 gram of sodium a day. The average daily consumption is 3,500 milligrams. So I'll repeat that. God designed us to eat a plant-based diet that consists of 250 to 500 milligrams of sodium. The average daily consumption of Western society is 3,500 milligrams. So it's more than 10 times. It's more than 10 times. Now, the NHS recommends that adults should eat no more than 6 grams of salt a day. And remember, what we should be eating is 0.5 gram a day. The NHS is recommended have 6 grams. That's 12 times as much, and that's around a teaspoon. Now, double-blind trials show that salt significantly increases our blood pressure. A single meal increases the blood pressure over the next 3 hours. So once you eat a meal with a high amount of salt, then it's going to increase your blood pressure for 3 hours after that meal. And also it starts affecting the arterial walls within 30 minutes of eating that high salt diet. Cutting sodium lowers blood pressure. So cut out the salt. The body has to work hard to get rid of excess salt. And the body, the way it's been done is with the kidneys. The kidneys are working hard to excrete that. Research also finds, when we look at the Adventist health studies, they looked at African American Adventists who were eating meat and white Americans who ate meat. And what they found is that the African Americans Adventists who ate meat far more often than their white counterparts. So culturally, it seems that people of the African Americans and Caribbeans in particular, we tend to eat meat far more than other people. I remember doing a presentation at a church one day, and someone came to me afterwards and said to me, fantastic presentation, but I'll never give up eating meat. And I asked them, oh, how often do you have meat? Every meal. Every meal? How many meals do you have? 3 meals a day. So breakfast, lunch, and evening, they were eating meat. All right, so I won't go there. So there's another research. It's called the DASH, and that means the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. This was done in 2001. DASH, Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And you can see on the screen, they had 3 groups. They had a control group, fruit and vegetable group, and they had the DASH diet. So the black dot is where they started, their blood pressure started, and the other dot, the white dot, is where their blood pressure went down. And what you can see that the people who are on the DASH diet, which consisted of diet rich in fruits and vegetables, low-fat dairy foods, and reduced in overall fat significantly, lowers blood pressure as well. So at this time, we're going to have a little break, and I'm going to invite Jean Patton to share a testimony. So I'm going to stop. And Jean Patton, I'm just going to exit this.
Greetings. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, as Lucille said, my name is Jean Patton, and I'm from Surrey, just outside London. I'm a fitness instructor, providing training and instructions of fitness program to individuals, groups. I engage clients in exercise routine for weight loss and various programs. Over the years, oops, sorry. You all right there? Over the years, I realized my blood pressure was very high. So I was given medication by my doctor. But even with the medication, my blood pressure continues to be high. I was told my heart is working too hard at times, especially I was studying late at night, and I'm sure that doesn't help. I was a mature student studying, so I'd be staying up studying sometime late into the mornings. I tried to exercise, do my own home remedies, but still my blood pressure continued to be high. One day while speaking to a church leader, we were talking about health and exercise, and she mentioned Manor House. The pastor told me that Manor House Health Center was highly recommended to her by a friend. Wow, I was excited. I thought, wow, I must try this. So immediately I called and booked a 10-day program. Within 3 days of being on that program, I could see a significant difference in my blood pressure within 3 days, which continues on for the rest of my stay, which was 10 days. I came to the conclusion that it's very, very important that we should try to find the root cause of our issues. We should try to treat our health concerns with lifestyle changes and natural remedies. As I said before, within a short time, I could see a difference. All of us should, I believe, should find ailments. No, sorry. I find ailments is a warning for us to improve our health. We get the signs and sometimes we ignore them. At Manor House, I was really, really surprised to see every day our blood pressure would be taken and saliva and urine would be taken. And from this, a program would be provided for each of us, which was very, very impressive. We had daily presentation with research for perfect health. At the end of the session, we were also left with a manual. And this manual had various information for diet and various natural herbs remedies and various contacts. We were also given opportunities to contact the retreat should in case we need any help. And we could also attend various presentations. We could also call the center anytime should in case we require further information. So that's roughly is my little synopsis on visiting Manor House. I did not discuss this with Lucy. This is just my experience. And as I said before, within 3 days, I could see a marked change. And since then, with all the information armed with, my blood pressure is staying down. That's it, Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you for sharing that. And one of the things that I've found really powerful as well is that Jean has been to other lifestyle centers.
Oh, yes.
She's been to, I don't know if many of you heard Jason Vale, the juice master. She's been to his retreats in, I think it was Portugal.
Oh, yes.
So I remember that. So she's been there and those places, but she hasn't had the same outcome that she got when she came to Manor House. So this is just evidence to show you that it can work when we follow the similar approach in England. We're going to look at how to establish the right habits. And that's what we talk about, how to establish right habits of reducing your blood pressure. So we're going to bring it home now. So what do we need to do to lower our blood pressure and also to prevent it? So we have to, one of the things we need to do is reduce excess weight. However, a person who has high blood pressure, you don't need to reach your optimum weight for you to achieve a drop in blood pressure. So just initiating a weight elimination program, all right, eliminating about 5 pounds, and that's how much you can lose on a 10-day program. That will bring the blood pressure down substantially in most cases. Now, we talk about weight elimination. We don't talk about losing weight, because anytime we lose something, if I lose some money, I want to find it. And in the same way, if I lose weight, often than not, we'll go back and find it again. So we talk about weight elimination. So eliminate just 5 pounds, and that will help to improve your hypertension. We recommend at Manor House is a 2-meal plan. And again, this is based on evidence and on science. So what we recommend is a good breakfast, a moderate lunch. They call it intermittent fasting. I just call it the 2-meal plan. We recommend no snacks, drink only water between meals. And if you are not a laboring man, so if you're not out digging holes and building houses, you only need 2 meals. So if you are a laboring man and you do a lot of physical work, then have a light evening meal. But if you're not, eliminate the evening meal. Also, get rid of refined sugar and free fats or fatty foods in the diet, while increasing fiber as well. We need daily moderate exercise for approximately like 45 minutes a day, brisk walking. Regular exercise may permit people who are afflicted with severe hypertension to reduce their dosage of antihypertensive pharmaceutical drugs. So in one study, they put people with hypertension on a stationary bike, and all they had to do is ride that bike for 15 minutes per day for 8 months. And at the end of that 8 months, they were able to reduce their blood pressure. Now, if you're struggling with weight issues, and especially the emotional aspect of weight, we also have got this program called the Mind Over Desire program. It's a 12-week program, and it's a free program. So we're looking at the habits that we need to have in order to reduce our high blood pressure. We need to cut out the salt. And rather than sort of reducing it gradually, the best thing to do is one day get rid of the salt, and then just let your taste buds get used, acclimatize to the natural taste of the food. So cut sodium, cut fat, sugar for a few weeks, and your taste buds will revert to normal. And what you'll find, once you've got rid of the sugars and the salt and the fat, the food will taste more flavorsome. And then if someone adds salt to your diet, you will actively dislike the salt. So don't add salt at the table or when cooking. Stop eating out so much. Takeaway foods, which are called cheap foods, are the worst. They have a high amount of salt and a high amount of saturated fats. Avoid processed foods, foods are in tins, and packaged foods. And then also, if you go shopping and you need to buy some package, read the labels on the package. Look at the sodium content and ensure that it has low sodium as well. So again, we're looking at the right habits. If you're drinking tea and coffee, eliminate caffeine. Eliminate it. Studies show that caffeine affects blood pressure. So 1 cup of coffee per day, or the equivalent in Coca-Cola drinks, may raise the diastolic and systolic blood pressure 5 to 6 points. It follows that eliminated caffeinated drinks has the potential to lower blood pressure by the same amount. It's important that people drink water. Many people who come on the retreat are suffering from chronic dehydration. I remember speaking to a lady on the phone one day, and she's had high blood pressure for a long time. And I asked her, how much water do you drink? Oh, I drink a lot of water. How much water do you drink? The actual amount. And she said, oh, 1.5 liters. I said, that's not sufficient water for your body. yeah, you're suffering from chronic dehydration. Insufficient water in the blood increases the thickness, the viscosity of the blood, and it makes it harder for the heart to pump the blood around the body. It's important that we adopt whole grains foods. So eat foods that are unrefined, like rice, whole grain rice, and other whole grain foods as well. Foods high in calcium content can significantly lower blood pressure. So a research showed that over 6,000 men and women with high blood pressure were classified according to their calcium intake. The results was that each gram of calcium consumed per day seems to lower the risk of high blood pressure by about 12%. However, it should be noted that people should be getting calcium through their diet, not taking supplements per se. So we should be having green leafy vegetables, which are good sources of calcium. And also a common breakfast food like oatmeal porridge has also been found to reduce blood pressure. But one of the things I recommend is to vary the food that we're eating every day. Don't have porridge oats every day for 7 days a week, for 4 weeks of the month. Change what you're eating and use oats in different things. Make a meatloaf or different things like that with oats. All right, so we're looking at the right habits. Remember Nabal? He had a stroke from some shocking news. So life stresses can raise our blood pressure. Stress does not seem to affect the diastolic blood pressure much, remember, but it tends to act more on the low one, the diastolic, down. It doesn't affect that one, it affects the systolic blood pressure. In fact, I had a friend this week rang me. She had a tiff with her husband. Blood pressure was very, very high. It was like 173 over 100 and 510, just because of stress. So we need to know how to manage stress. Stress is a broad subject, but there are some excellent books available to manage stress, depression, and anxiety. So my friend, so my husband's here, said, how did you sort it? So what I recommended for my friend, we mentioned it, I think last week or a few weeks ago, was cayenne pepper and garlic, loads of garlic, crushed up together with some, I think it was lemon juice, and she took it and within about, 10, 15 minutes, her blood pressure came down. Yes. So we're looking at stress, all right? How do you manage depression, which is excess past? How do we manage stress, which is excess present? How do you manage anxiety, which is excess future? There's lots of tools out there that you can use. I recommend the power of hope. It's something that the TTI could invest in and give to some of their audience, the power of hope. In fact, you can get it online. You can get it as a PDF. It's a wonderful little book that gives you the tools for managing depression, stress, and anxiety. Biblical meditation may lower blood pressure in hypertensive patients as well. Research has shown. What is biblical meditation? Reciting scripture, learning scripture and reciting it. So when the stress comes onto you, remember those scriptures, repeat it out loud. Singing is a weapon that we can use to get rid of pressure as well. When we feel stressed, sing out loud. Another tool is progressive muscle relaxation, may lower blood pressure as well in hypertensive patients. And progressive muscle relaxation, when I was a midwife, that's what they taught us. So when women were going through labor, rather than fighting against the pain, tensing themselves all up, we taught the women how to relax each muscle. And so that also helps to lower blood pressure. And finally, smoking. Quit smoking if you're smoking. Tobacco smoking increases the risk of hypertension by causing vasoconstriction. The blood vessels just clamp down. All right, so if you have blood pressure, so we just looked at how to establish the right habits. So if you have blood pressure, what can we do to assist nature to correct itself? All right, so how can we assist nature? So we're going to go through some of the things that you can take. Fruits, take. So ones that you can take, which are linked to reducing high blood pressure: bananas, blueberry, cranberries, kumquats, passion fruit, pomegranates, watermelon. So watermelon is a fantastic diuretic that helps to lower your blood pressure. It also supports the kidneys as well. Grains, I mentioned oats and rice, and we're talking about whole grain rice, and there's so many different rices out there. You know, you've got jasmine rice, you've got basmati rice, you've got black rice, red rice, Italian rice. There's so many different rices out there. Invest, go on Whole Foods online and buy some rice and treat yourself to all the different rices. Grasses that are good for lowering your blood pressure: wheatgrass, excellent. And you don't have to get the powder. Get some of the berries, the wheat berries, soak them, put them on some compost, grow it and juice it. Herbs, there's some powerful herbs which we've got in England. Wow, we've got nettle. Nettle is growing at the moment. Sharon mentioned about the green juices. I highly recommend nettle. Nettle covers so many different health conditions. So nettle is excellent, and reason why it's excellent, because its roots go right down into the soil and picks up those minerals deep in the soil. So nettles, they're growing up at the moment. Motherwort, ginger, cayenne, red clover. We're coming up to spring now. You'll be seeing the red clover growing around the place. So we've got nettle, we've got a red clover, corn silk. So in the summer, you'll be able to get the corn silk from the corn, rosemary, valerian. And so if you're overseas, moringa and noni as well. So in terms of beans, we've got aduki beans, which are very, very good. And then in terms of seeds, we have celery seeds, lower blood pressure. Up to 85% of hypertensive people who took celery seeds were able to lower their blood pressure. Celery seeds act like a diuretic and as a pseudo-canal calcium channel blocker. Flaxseed, chia seed, grape, psyllium, and sesame seeds. So flax seeds are brilliant. And there's research out there that shows flaxseed is more powerful, more potent than hypertensive drugs. So we're looking at what we can do to assist nature if you've got high blood pressure. So we're looking at the algae. There's chlorella, there's spirulina. These are powders that you can have and you can add it to your green juices. There's certain mushrooms, maitake, oyster, reishi, and shiitake mushrooms. They are currently being sold in Tesco, so you can buy those now. There are sea vegetables like kelp and wakame. Other vegetables that are very good for lowering blood pressure is beetroot juice, celery, again, garlic, onions, spinach, and tomatoes. All right. So garlic is powerful. Yes, it's a powerful antihypertensive drug. It helps to thin blood. It helps to clear out the arteries as well. So much research has been done on garlic. And for instance, 40% of hypertensive subjects who took garlic experienced a reduction of 20 millimeters of mercury or more, 20 points in their blood pressure after 7 days of garlic consumption. However, If you are on blood thinners, Clopidogrel and all those other ones, really be mindful of the garlic, right? Because you can make your blood too thin. And also onions are excellent as well. And cooked onions are more potent than the raw onions. They're helpful in reducing hypertension in patients. Yeah. All right, so just want to have a brief look at hypertensive drugs. All right, so there are hypertensive drugs are not as effective as diet and lifestyle in reducing blood pressure. Also, hypertensive drugs do not prevent the cognitive deterioration associated with hypertension. There are lots of side effects as well. There are 4 main types: the calcium channel blockers for things like amlodipine, felidipine, etc. Then you have the diuretics, which may go on to cause, those ones help to excrete the water. It causes electrolyte disturbances. Then the beta blockers, atenolol is a popular one. Propranolol is another one. They cause lethargy, and for the men who take it, it causes impotence. And they also cause arrhythmia. And do you believe it as well? One of the side effects of them is high blood pressure. Can you believe it? And then you have ACE inhibitors. You have similar side effects. And one of the calcium channel blockers and the ACE inhibitors, they tend to cause a lot of swelling, feet swelling as well. So as I mentioned, they are not as effective as lifestyle changes and certain foods. So for example, if we look at someone was on hypertensive drugs and they were taking flaxseed, the hypertensive drug will lower your blood pressure 8/3 points or 5 to 2 points. Whereas if you eat the flaxseed, it lowers it 15/7 points. So it's more effective than your hypertensive drugs. All right. And essentially, all drugs are poisonous. But as TTI says, we do not recommend anyone coming off their hypertensive drugs. As I said, you either change your lifestyle totally, or take your blood pressure tablets and be mindful of the side effects that you will get. So in summary, things that we can do is eat plenty of fruits, vegetable grains, unsalted nuts in moderation, and other low sodium foods. Avoid foods such as pickles, cured ham, Chinese rice, bulong, and other high sodium foods. Read the labels of the things that you are buying. Avoid low fiber foods such as meat and dairy products. Eliminate coffee, tea, cola, drinks, and alcohol from the diet. Drink water. I cannot reiterate that enough. Drink water according to your weight and your health condition. Drink water. Stop smoking if you're smoking. Put the salt shaker away. Don't put it on the table. Don't put it in cooking off your food. Bring your weight down to the recommended level for your height and weight. Also work out your visceral fat. And so that is a hidden fat in your body. So even though you may look thin, you can be tofu. So you can be thin on the outside, but fat on the inside. So we need to eliminate that visceral fat as well. Adopt exercise, brisk walking, and learn how to cope with stress. And remember, prevention is better than cure. We need to be following this lifestyle, the original prescription for us. And most of all, we need to have complete trust and gratitude in a God that loves us. So we looked at hypertension, the silent assassin. There is no need for any of us to become another statistic, a victim of lifestyle choices. By putting in place these lifestyle changes, you'll be able to disarm hypertension, the silent assassin. However, if you are struggling, if you need help to implement any of these changes, then we have the Restore to Health residential program. And this is a program that Jean Patton went on.